The latest speculation around Juan Soto has the New York Mets as the most aggressive bidder for his services. But if they win the sweepstakes, the spending can't stop there.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $28 off your first purchase. Well, all eyes are on Juan Soto right now, and there's been a lot of speculation that the New York Mets are out in front of the bidding, that they are in the position of being the aggressor to land him, and that Steve Cohen will not be denied. Here are the biggest headlines, I would say, that have come out of the Juan Soto sweepstakes. Carlos Baerga, who is often out in front when it comes to reporting what he is hearing on Latin American baseball players, and sometimes he's right. Sometimes he hits the nail on the head. Other times he says things that are completely off, and we never really revisit that. If you're wrong in the reporting game sometimes, or the prediction game, it doesn't really stick to you. And when you're right, though, sometimes those things get held up. So I take anything that Carlos Baerga says with a big grain of salt because you really don't know. But his claim is the Mets have a $660 million offer on the table for Juan Soto. Now, others have reported that no formal offers are out there. Who knows? But let's just take that at face value for a second. What would that mean? 660 divided by 14 just happens to come out to $47.1 million. If you look at average annual value when it comes to the luxury tax, Shohei Ohtani's contract comes out to $46.1 million. So a $660 million contract for Juan Soto would accomplish both eclipsing Ohtani's total value in present day money, as well as the average annual value. So Juan Soto would be the highest paid player in Major League Baseball on both fronts, from an average annual value perspective and when it comes to present day value. The only notch on the belt that he'd be missing is just having the largest contract, because Ohtani's number still comes in at $700 million. But of course, with $680 million of it being deferred, which is what drives that present day money value all the way down to somewhere in the mid 400 millions. Some will say it's at 437 million. Others say 473. When it comes to the luxury tax, Major League Baseball is essentially saying it's $461 million. Regardless, if we actually believe that offer is real, that the Mets have already slid a number across the table to Scott Boras and Juan Soto, say, hey, why don't you chew on this? We're going to put a $660 million offer on the table. You would think that they're going to win this bidding, because I don't know if there's any other team that's willing to go that far. $47 million a year, maybe. Who knows? There might be a team that goes to $50 million a year. But I feel like if you're going to put that much on the table for Juan Soto when it comes to average annual value, it's got to be shorter than 14 years. I don't know if anyone's going to put those two things together. And we talked about this on yesterday's show. The contract that I proposed, my projection, was 15 years as the differentiating factor, but the final number coming in at $645 million, which is $43 million a season, less than Shohei Ohtani when it comes to average annual value. Who knows? Who knows where this bidding goes? But there was another interesting, I don't know if I want to call it a report, but some commentary by Michael Kay on the Michael Kay Show today, where he said the Mets, from what he's hearing, are willing to go $50 million more than any other team. So if the Yankees put forward a $600 million offer, Scott Boras can take it to the bank. The Mets will give him $650. If a $650 million offer is on the table, make it $700. Now, this one is really interesting, because if Steve Cohen really said that in the meeting, for one, I mean, it really does give Scott Boras all the incentive in the world to drag this thing out and just try to get other teams to keep driving the bidding up, because he knows there's that big bidder that's always going to put his hand up and say, yep, I raise it by 50 million. And that could create a snowball effect where Juan Soto's getting a contract that's over the $700 million mark and will really eclipse Shohei Ohtani. I really don't know what to believe, but here was one more interesting note that we heard today. Mark Feinsand says that there's momentum for this to get done before the winter meetings. And I really hope that's the case, because Juan Soto can clog up this market. I think Scott Boras might understand that and know what he has in store with Pete Alonso, with Alex Bregman, with Corbin Burns, Blake Snell, even a free agent like Sean Manaea. He has a lot of work to do this offseason. And if he can get the Juan Soto domino to fall quickly, and if it's to the Mets and it's $660 million and it eclipses Shohei Ohtani, it's a job well done, and he can move on to other things. And from the Mets' perspective, they too can move on to other things. And that's really what I want to focus on with the show today, because let's just assume that Steve Cohen is looking at Juan Soto as a free agent that he has to have, that he will not be denied on, that he is going to be the highest bidder on, and by being the highest bidder, he is going to land Juan Soto. That's amazing. And the New York Mets have a future in place with Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor, two guys that you can absolutely win a championship with as your best two players. That's amazing. And fans should not worry about the contract, whatever it gets to, because if Steve Cohen is willing to sign on the dotted line, I don't think you have to worry about all of a sudden 3 years from now, the New York Mets are cutting payroll everywhere because they have to get behind or get below some luxury tax line. Like, if the Mets are going to commit $50 million a year, even to Juan Soto, I think the understanding that Steve Cohen is willing to continue to be that top tier luxury tax spending team. Damn it, if all the penalties, it doesn't matter. And they're going to keep putting a winner in front of the fan base, and they will be building around Juan Soto to have a dynasty where Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor are going to go down as great Mets who are in the Hall of Fame, who hopefully win multiple championships together. That's the goal. So if all of that comes to fruition, it's a huge win for Mets fans. But when it comes to how you build out a team around these guys in 2025, it can't just stop and end with Juan Soto. You can't be all out in front aggressive to sign Soto and then just not address any other needs, because this team still clearly has needs. We're going to talk about pitching in the next segment, but let's just talk about the starting lineup. All right, you sign Juan Soto. He's going to replace Pete Alonso. Great. That's sort of your move. You're saying we're not going to re-sign Pete. We've invested it all in Soto, and we're not going to do anything else. Let's just say that's their mindset. By signing Soto, you don't have to be aggressive elsewhere to build out your lineup. You got Lindor at short, Soto on right, Vientos maybe at first, Brandon Nimmo on left, Starling Marte maybe becomes your DH. Jeff McNeil could be your opening day second baseman. Obviously, there's a lot of depth at that position with Luis Angel Acuna, Ronnie Mauricio, Jet Williams waiting in the wings. The Mets are set at second. Catcher, you got Francisco Alvarez. That's your top seven in the lineup. Third base, if Vientos is replacing Alonso, Brett Beatty, Ronnie Mauricio, who's playing that position? Center field, is it just Tyrone Taylor? There's still holes. And yeah, you could just sign Soto and go into next year with all your guys and stay internal. And all of a sudden, your bench is going to be Acuna, Mauricio, or Beatty, Torrens, and what? Drew Gilbert's just going to start on the big league roster. The Mets have to make other moves. Even with signing Juan Soto, they got to figure out center field. Is it just going to be Tyrone Taylor and they're going to hope that Drew Gilbert or Jet Williams or Acuna can be the guy at some point early in the season? Or are they going to make a trade or sign Harrison Bader back? What are they going to do in center? And also, how are you going to replace Pete Alonso's production in the infield? What are you going to do? Are you going to just slide Vientos to first? Great. Who's playing third? We've talked about this throughout the offseason. So, yes, Juan Soto would be amazing, but the needs don't stop there. And by signing Juan Soto, you do create a little bit of a tricky proposition moving forward on how you spend your money around potentially a $50 million player when you still have a $34 million player per year in Francisco Lindor. I think his luxury tax number is like 33.8 or something. It's a little bit less because he has some deferred money in his deal, but regardless, more than 30 million. And Brandon Nimmo, who's past $20 million per year. How do you do it? How do you address these needs? I want to talk about that a little bit in the next segment. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time, it's a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. Game Time Picks is a feature they have that'll make getting tickets for your live events even easier, because with Game Time Picks, you can filter out the fluff and you can see only the best possible deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. They'll show you the best deals they got. You look at the seat map, see which seat looks right to you. The price listed right there. You can also filter for all-in pricing, so there'll be no hidden fees. And you can see the view of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect before you arrive. 2 taps, you're all set. You can buy tickets in a matter of seconds. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. And we talked about the Mets' needs in their lineup in the last segment. If you sign Juan Soto, great. He's your right fielder of the future. Nemo's in left. You got to figure out center field. Hopefully your prospects can do that at some point, but you still need to figure out center field for the 2025 season. And if you are going to let Pete Alonso walk, it's a lot of production in a corner infield spot that you're going to have to make up somehow. Mark Vientos could be your first baseman, but then you're losing a third baseman who hit you 27 home runs and drove in, 60-something runs, 70 runs, regardless, the guy that this upcoming season, if you keep him at third, he could be a 40-100 guy if everything breaks right for Mark Vientos. And I still like the idea of keeping Pete Alonso, where you have that duo together in the infield that has the ability to hit 80 home runs between them. I still want to see that happening, and I don't necessarily think that signing Juan Soto completely takes the Mets out of the Pete Alonso sweepstakes. But also, beyond just that, you have to think about your rotation and your bullpen, because as much as Juan Soto is an incredible luxury that you can build around, a franchise-altering bat, a guy that for the next 10 years can be a top 5 hitter in the game, that's amazing. But you still got to pitch, and you're losing 3 starting pitchers that really carried the workload for you last year: Jose Quintana, Luis Severino, and Sean Manaea. What you have right now on the books for next year is Kodai Senga, David Peterson, and really that's it as far as trusted starting pitchers. Tyler McGill, Paul Blackburn, Jose Budo. Those guys are all going to vie for a rotation spot. But your best serve if those 3 guys are vying for that 5th starter spot in spring training. And Paul Blackburn, if I'm not mistaken, might not be ready for the start of spring training because of that really weird spinal injury that he had. So you got to add some arms there. You do have Brandon Sproat waiting in the wings, your top pitching prospect. Blade Tidwell, Mike Vassell, Dom Hamill, they're all up in AAA. They were this past year. So yes, there's some depth in the organization, but you can't just count on that. You got to add multiple starting pitchers this offseason. The Mets have said as much. And then you go to the bullpen. You got Edwin Diaz. You got Reed Garrett. Hopefully Daniel Nunez will be healthy next year. And then you get a lot of question marks. Huascar Brazaban, Danny Young, Alex Young. These are all names we saw last year. Sean Reed-Foley, Grant Hartwig. They've added some guys to the 40-man roster already. Dylan Covey, Justin Hagenman was the guy they just added today to a major league deal. I'm sure that is a deal where they're going to be able to option him to the minor leagues. A guy that pitched in AAA with the Red Sox this past year, had an ERA in the high 4s, but I'm sure the Mets have identified something they believe they can tap into. They picked up Kevin Herget. They've added some of these arms as far as 40-man roster fillers, but that bullpen still needs a trusted setup man or 2. So if you need at least 2 starters, at least 2 really solid relievers, and if you sign Juan Soto, you still have to address that corner infield position in center field, you got a lot of fish to fry. And if you spend $45+ million on Soto, and let's just say you are aggressive to replace Pete Alonso or you sign Pete Alonso as well as addressing center field, if those two positions cost you $30 million, well, now that's $75 million you're adding to your budget before you sign a single pitcher. Now, it's Steve Cohen's Mets. Can they put $75 million into their lineup and $75 million into their pitching staff? Yes, they can. But the point is, the aggression can't just stop at Juan Soto. You don't just win the offseason by signing Juan Soto. If you decide to go for that luxury, that's amazing, but you still have to address these other needs. If the Mets go into next year and they're just counting on Brett Beatty and Ronnie Mauricio at third and Tyrone Taylor and Luis Angel Acuna in center field, I don't know if that's enough. And that's not even discussing where they might have spent their money on pitching. They might have to spend $30+ million on an ace. So all of a sudden, you see how all that money can tick up. And then there's the other aspect of all of this that I don't think has been talked about nearly enough. And that is the penalty that you're going to sustain if you sign Juan Soto or anybody else who has received the qualifying offer as a repeat luxury tax offender, or just as a luxury tax offender in general. You are penalized more strictly when it comes to signing any free agent who has already received a qualifying offer. Not only are you losing just one pick, you're now losing multiple picks. You're not losing your first round pick anymore, which is good, but you're losing your second and your fifth, as well as $1 million in international bonus pool spending. That's for the following year. So in 2025, the Mets will have $1 million less to play with if they sign Juan Soto. Now, Soto could be the best player in the team for a decade. You take that trade-off, but I think you really have to be cautious beyond Soto. If you strike out, or even if you sign him, on what other free agents you are willing to sign who have received the qualifying offer. And that's what I'm going to touch on next. When it comes to building around Juan Soto, you got to be aggressive spending, but you also have to really think through which guys you're spending on. So we're going to go through that wrinkle to this in just a minute. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So you can get a hunch in the middle of the game. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. If you just visit FanDuel.com to join today, you're going to get started again with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So find the bet that looks like an absolute layup, the $5 bet that you know you're going to win. And if you do, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets coming your way. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're an everyday listener, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks. On the Mets, you can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways, and you get the lineup graphics sent to your phone every day throughout the regular season. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to celtics.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so I want to talk a little bit more about the qualifying offer and what it means when you get penalized. So like I said, you're going to forfeit your second and fifth round draft pick. Now, if you're signing a free agent of Juan Soto's caliber, okay, that's fine. You're also going to give up that bonus pool money, the $1 million, but that's acceptable, right? Here's the other element of this, though. If you sign another qualifying offer player, you're going to forfeit your third and sixth round picks as well. So all of a sudden, through the first 6 rounds of the draft, if the Mets sign Juan Soto and Corbin Burnes, they're only going to draft in the first round and the fourth round. That's it. They're not going to draft in the second, the fifth, the second, the third, the fifth, and the sixth. Now, it's not just about losing draft picks, though, because if you pay attention to the MLB draft, every single pick is assigned a slot value. And teams are very creative about how they use their money that they can spend on draft picks, where you might see them go over slot on a 9th round pick, Could be a shortstop that you draft out of high school who is committed to go to Vanderbilt, right? But the Mets know if they give him $2 million, they can sign X draft pick shortstop and get a early round talent in a later round. So teams love to manipulate that bonus pool money. Just looking at last year, for example, the Mets had $9,572,200 to spend on their draft picks. Their second round pick was slotted at a little over $2 million. Their fifth round pick just under $500,000. So if you sign Juan Soto and you just look at last year's bonus pool or last year's draft pool, you go from $9.5 million you'd have to spend on your draft picks down to $7 million. That's a lot of wiggle room that you're losing, as well as, of course, the 2 picks. Now you sign another qualifying offer player. You're forfeiting your third round pick, your 6th round pick. Third round pick for the Mets last year was slotted at $934,800. 6th round pick, $363,100. So you put together those 4 picks that you lose, and you look at the value that was assigned to those picks last year when it comes to the slot. You'd be losing $3,805,800 that you could spend on your draft picks, which is basically 40% of the money you have to spend in the draft, as well as 4 picks, as well as $1 million in international bonus pool money. That is a ton of future prospect capital that you're losing. Now, you have the right front office in place. You have faith in David Stearns and Chris Gross and all the guys that are there to work within the constraints that you might have as a luxury tax team to identify talent and figure it out. But you don't want to handcuff them too much. So yes, for Juan Soto, it is a tough pill to swallow, but you go for it. You go for it and you're okay with it. Let's say the Mets strike out on Juan Soto. Is it really worth it to give up your 2nd round pick, your 5th round pick, $1 million in international bonus pool money for Willy Adames? Is that really worth it? To me, the answer is a resounding no. It's not worth it. Is it worth it to give all that up for Corbin Burnes? You might say yes, he's the ace you need. I say Blake Snell doesn't have a qualifying offer. Sign him. To me, the free agents that don't have a qualifying offer are significantly more attractive when you get penalized this way. Granted, if you're already getting penalized for Juan Soto, giving up that 3rd and 6th round pick, it hurts, but you're already in it. So if you identify Soto and Burnes as priorities 1 and 2, and you get them, well, now you just landed the top bat and the top arm in this class, and you can't be mad at it. And at that point, you've already gotten penalized as much as you can. I'm under the belief that from what you can read at MLB.com, and somebody could correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, that's it. So if you want to sign a 3rd player who got a qualifying offer, there's no other penalties. You might as well just keep going. You might as well sign Adames too. Why not, right? But I think when you try to understand this system and how it penalizes teams, there's a reason why you might stay away from some of these qualifying offer guys. And I would look at Blake Snell, Jack Flaherty, Nathan Eovaldi, Shane Bieber, Usei Kikuchi. These are the pitchers who aren't attached to a QO that I would be more interested in the Mets signing. Also have your own guys. Re-signing Sean Manaea and Luis Severino, that's not a bad way to, avoid penalty. Granted, if you're really getting into the weeds of this, if you're going to get a draft pick after the 4th round that's going to be attached to some slot value, you can get some money back by letting Manaea and Severino walk, right? That could offset the cost of that, or that will offset the cost of that 5th round pick that you're going to lose for Juan Soto and eat into some of that 2nd round pick slot value. So there is an incentive to let those guys walk because you get other picks that are going to have some slot value attached to it, and that does give you more money to play with. Overall, though, I think when you're looking at building around Juan Soto, if you sign Soto, I personally wouldn't like the Mets to then sign Burnes or then sign Adames. I would focus on trying to build your team aggressively, but through the other free agents on the market that you're not going to get penalized for. So if you can re-sign Sean Manaea, I'm all in on that. If you can sign Blake Snell, even better, because there's no qualifying offer attached. It's just money. I think that's where the focus has to be. But again, the whole entire point of today's show is to really put it out there that, yes, all these reports are indicating the New York Mets are the most aggressive team in the Juan Soto bidding. Steve Cohen might just be looking at Soto as the free agent he can't miss on, the guy he's been waiting on for 4 years now since he took over the team. This is the free agent to get. It's a Scott Boras client. He has been building that relationship for 4 years now with Boras. A lot of conversations back and forth between Steve Cohen and Scott Boras. This is the time. This is the free agent. You want to land him. That's amazing. You can't just stop spending there. You can't just close up the pocketbook and say, all right, David Stearns, I hired you to be creative. I got you Juan Soto with my money. Now be creative to fill out this rotation and this lineup, because you can't just cut corners after investing everything in Soto. You got to keep on adding. And that might mean saying, you know what, Pete Alonso, his market's not that crazy. We can get him for, I know in my projections article, or my predictions article that I have coming up for Just Baseball, which we're going to publish on Wednesday, I believe, I got Alonso at 6 years, $140 million. I've talked on this show in the past about a contract that has significant deferrals for Pete Alonso, where he can get some big flashy number. He can be a $200 million man, but then the average annual value comes down a lot when it comes to present day money. So instead of Pete Alonso making $27 million per year when it comes to average annual value on the luxury tax, it's more like $22 million. And that's a little bit easier to stack with the Soto, with Lindor, with Nimmo, and still have some room to not be absolutely murdered by the luxury tax every year. Hey, if Steve Cohen's okay with it, and he's okay with getting penalized $100+ million every single year, by all means, that's Steve Cohen's prerogative. But you have to also think about wanting to add next year and beyond that. So that's where this is really tricky for the New York Mets. If you sign Juan Soto, do you want to tie yourself to 6 years of Pete Alonso as well? Sort of lock yourself into that team. It's really tough decisions the Mets have to make, but they can't just trust that Soto's everything. You sign Juan Soto, you're still going to have a hole in that infield left by Pete Alonso. That's not changing. You might not sign Christian Walker because he got a qualifying offer. But hey, go out and get Carlos Santana and at least raise the floor of your team. Because hey, if Brett Beatty is amazing, or Ronnie Mauricio is amazing, or Luis Angel Acuna slides over to third and he's amazing, by all means, maybe Carlos Santana is a luxury that you don't really need, and you sign him to a 1-year deal and he's just a veteran presence on your bench. That could happen. But Carlos Santana just won a Gold Glove, so he's a very good defensive first baseman. And he's been hitting, 23 homers the past 2 years with an identical OPS. He's just a solid bat, and he would raise the floor of your team, where you keep Mark Vientos at third base. And you got Carlos Santana, who, 23 home runs, 71 RBIs. Nothing flashy, but that is a really solid first baseman that you can go to the bank with. So maybe that's the move. Maybe you're just signing Paul Goldschmidt and thinking that as a guy that still was able to hit 20+ home runs, even though he had a horrible season. He might have a little bit more left in the tank, and it's not going to cost you any prospects to sign him. It's just money, and it's a short-term deal, so you're not worried about the long-term ramifications. If he ends up being washed, hopefully your prospects can fill in at third base, and you can slide Vientos over, or maybe even first base, whatever it is. You can try to figure it out. The Mets cannot just sign Juan Soto. And that's where this offseason gets really exciting, because if the Juan Soto sweepstakes wrap up in the next couple weeks before the winter meetings, if we know before December 1st that Juan Soto's a New York Met, you have that set in stone. And now it really is the exciting puzzle that gets to be built, where you have your cornerstones and then you still have all of free agency available to you to try to fill those needs in center field, replacing or re-signing Pete Alonso, and then all the pitching you have to add, because this team needs an ace. This team needs probably 3 starting pitchers altogether, but at least 2. And ideally, they're in the market for a elite setup man. I don't know if you're going to sign Tanner Scott if he costs $15 million per, but can you find the diamonds in the rough, whether that's bringing back Ryan Stanek and then finding somebody else? Is there a trade you can make for a Devin Williams so that you can add an elite setup man to your stable? Maybe you can then extend Devin Williams. Who knows? But the Mets have to be aggressive beyond just signing Juan Soto. It's awesome to hear that they're the front runner potentially, but this team has a lot of needs, which means we have a lot to discuss throughout this offseason. I appreciate all of you who continue to tune into the show every day. Make sure you follow wherever you get your podcasts, rate and review as well. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube so we can get to 11,000 subscribers. You can follow me on social media, Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. We're talking about Locked On Sports today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.